Weirding Way Media.
Night, Mr. Walters.
You see that guy over there? Now he's an actor. The guy on the phone, he's a prize fighter. Me, I'm a cab driver. I'm the only cab driver in this place.
Good evening and welcome to Night, Mr. Walters, a taxi podcast. I'm your co-host HP, and with me, as always, is my other co-host. It's Father Malone. Father Malone, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. But then again, maybe it was one of those murder-suicide things.
We'll get to that. We're going to talk some taxi. This week, we're covering episode 14 called Friends. This was written by Earl Pomerantz, and we know who it was directed by. It was directed by James Burrows. There you go.
James Burrows of Friends fame, directing Friends here as a precursor to the eventual series.
Burrows is getting meta before there was even such a thing. Just a reminder, we're doing these shows in broadcast order and not in order of filming. Just a little background before we get into the episode. According to Pomerantz in the official Taxi fan guide by Frank Lovies, everybody's heard me mention this several times on this podcast. Every time he writes for a series, he writes an episode involving a goldfish. Now, you're going to find out, those of you not familiar with the episode, that it centers around some goldfish and what happens between two friends. Anyway, some listeners may also recall the goldfish episode of The Cosby Show where the Huxtables, I think it's Rudy's goldfish dies, and the Huxtables all gather around the toilet and have a little funeral for the goldfish. That was also Earl Pomerantz. Earl Pomerantz wrote for The Cosby Show as well, among other episodes.
Did they lip sync a jazz standard?
Dizzy Gillespie played the funeral march on his horn.
He was Grandpa number 12. Grandpa Dizzy Gillespie. Grandpa Sammy Davis Jr.
The story goes that when Pomerantz was still single, he went out of town and he gave his goldfish to Les Charles to take care of. And when he came back, one of the goldfish had died. Oh, so sad. So this is apparently why Earl Pomerantz has a thing now where he always writes a goldfish episode. He's been haunted by this memory ever since he was a young, hungry writer in Hollywood, I suppose.
Thanks to one of the creators of Cheers, we get this goldfish trope playing through popular American television for the next 20 years.
So anyway, let's get to the episode. We start off in the garage where Laka is complaining. He's moaning about a toothache. This is as close as we get in this episode to a B plot, is it not?
It is 100% the only B plot, and they wrap it up, I think, within the same scene, which is really, really welcome. But I should say, we don't start in the garage. We start with some B-roll in the back of a cab, a ghost point of view, because we cut to the cab pulling into the garage, and there's no one in the back seat, and we can't really make out the driver. And what cab is it? Did you make it out? It's cab 804.
I noted the B-roll, but I didn't notice the extra bits and bobs that you described. That's fantastic. I love that.
Also, when we get into the garage, we start in this tracking shot across the garage, like finding Louis amidst the columns and the people crossing through the frame as he's trying to get to Latka. It was pretty great.
The direction is interesting. I think Burrows always, and sometimes he gets a little too creative maybe, but it's always interesting. I think he's always trying to push the bounds of sitcom direction. Latka's complaining about a toothache. He asks Louis if he can leave early to go to the dentist, and Louis just laughs in his face. Louis tells a bad dentist joke, and even after Latka is laughing along with him, Louis still won't let him go to the dentist. And at this point, as a viewer, I'm thinking this is a wind-up. This is going to transpire through the whole episode. It's going to be one thing after another, getting Latka to the dentist. But like you said, it's going to be resolved in record time here. At this point, Tony comes in and he starts talking with the other cabbies about a blind date that he went on. Apparently, Bobby had a date named Dominique, whose cousin didn't want to be alone. So Tony took her out for Bobby. And I want to make a side note here before we get into this. This is my first of several side notes that I'm going to break in on. I think we might have our first time traveler in the garage. Did you notice this, Father Malone?
Interesting. Who?
He's either a time traveler or an assassin or perhaps a documentary filmmaker. I'm not really sure what, but as Tony goes to get his envelope from the dispatch cage, there's a fellow sitting in the bench in front of the coffee machine.
Yeah.
And he has a green baseball cap on with a yellow bill. He looks a little out of place anyway. And he is looking over and or cleaning some kind of black object in his hands. Did you notice this?
No, I did not.
I can't believe you didn't notice this.
I'm kicking myself for not. I'm always on the lookout for the background folk.
It's hard to know what it is that he's working on because we're dealing with standard definition television, so it's not that clear. And there's some kind of white towel or rag in his lap as if this object has been wrapped in it, or maybe he's using it to clean this object. Is it a camera? Is it some kind of high-tech weapon? Is it something futuristic? We don't know. And what's more is the cabbies are all uniformly ignorant of him. Nobody looks his way. Nobody pays this odd traveler from another dimension any mind. I thought it was very odd. I can't believe you didn't notice this. You always pick up on these background characters.
Well, that only tracks because Space Blonde is back. She's in the same scene in the background. She's not wearing her NASA foam foil reflective gear today, however. She's wearing this form-fitting leather, might be suede, couldn't tell, rain jacket. She's wandering in the back there, so she might be in cahoots with that guy. Or he might just be like cleaning a carburetor, like giving Latka a hand.
Well, that's where I landed with this, but I didn't notice. So you're saying Space Blonde, of course, from our discussion of Men Are Such Beasts. I think it was episode 10 that we covered. So yeah, yep. Maybe this woman that Bobby insisted that Tony take out, she's like a boxer. It's implied that she's too tough for Tony, which, as we know, Tony is a washed up fighter who doesn't have a good record anyway. So it's hardly surprising.
It's not washed up. He's actively working.
He is, but he loses a lot more than he wins.
Yeah, that just means he's a terrible fighter. It doesn't mean he's a washed up fighter.
I guess washed up implies that he's had some kind of glory period, which clearly he is not. So perhaps washed up.
Robert Ryan at the end of the setup, he's a washed up fighter. Tony Banta is just a bad fighter.
Oh, there you go. I guess you're right. So he's just a bad fighter. It's clear that Tony is doing this out of loyalty to Bobby. He describes Bobby as his best friend. And Nardo says to Tony, just because Bobby's your best friend doesn't mean that you have to do everything that Bobby asks you to. Ever sowing the seeds of discord, Burns, who's sitting there, says that, yes, he does need to do what his best friend asks him to do.
What's troubling you? What's troubling you, Tony? Is Wheeler pushing you too hard as your best friend? Well, that's what best friends do. And you should expect the same. Just saying. Anyway, Nardo.
And he even goes so far as to relate an example of a childhood friend. Burns has a childhood friend that he said he would do anything for this friend and vice versa. And they had a special signal that they would yell at each other when they were in need. And the signal, do you remember the signal, Father Malone?
Yakabai, the most frequently used phrase here in Taxi. Yakabai, what does it mean? It means everything. It's like aloha, but cubed. It means ass, I think. It means fire. It means goodbye. It means something that would rouse people during a strike. Like it's a strike chant. Yakabai. Continuing
on our trend of Burns and his real mission in the garage, I can only assume that it comes from some kind of ancient devil worshipping language, because there's some reason why everybody knows what it means, but they can't agree on what it says. It's interesting.
That is interesting. Maybe he sowed that seed of Yakabai. He orchestrated Latka's coming to America just to get him into the cab company, to get that phrase in there. It's like one of the Lovecraftian old gods. It's like saying their name too much. You resurrect them. Yakabai.
So he screams Yakabai, and as Father Malone was intimating, Latka comes running with a fire extinguisher because he's alarmed, because apparently Yakabai means something in Latka's language. But John assures him that it was only a false Yakabai alarm. In all seriousness, it's getting kind of sad. It's clear at this point, because we're 14 episodes in, and I'm sure at this point the writers were already saying to themselves, like, Burns is giving us nothing as a character. He is literally just a bump on a log in every scene we put him in. He hasn't been a main focus of an episode since Money Troubles with his wife, with Dorothy Hamilcutt. My feeling is, and this could just be personal feelings intruding, but it seems to me that it's fait accompli. At this point, I think we can agree as viewers, it's painfully clear that Burns has nothing to do in these episodes. I think they're already plotting how to get past him, because he's not doing it. He's just sitting at the table piping in a funny comment once in a while, but that's about the sum total of his action in any of these episodes going forward. Anyway, at this point, Alex and Bobby come in. Bobby, I don't know if you noticed this too, Father. Bobby has the collar popped on his leather coat, and it's so big and so wide, he looked like a low-rent Dracula, in my opinion. Did you notice that too?
I absolutely noticed, except there was nothing low rent about it. He looked like a comic book character here. And in the next episode in particular, Wheeler's gonna completely comic book out.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff going on in the next episode, so stay tuned. At that point, Tony gets a call on the payphone.
Wait, Jeff gets a line.
Oh, he does. That's right. He gets the call, right? And he says, "Hey,
Yeah.
Tony, it's the gym for you," right? Yeah.
J. Allen Thomas gets his first line here. You know what's weird, HP?
Yeah.
Years later, J. Allen Thomas would show up on Cheers, playing a character named Jeff.
He did? I didn't know that.
It's true. That's a Halloween episode, too.
So he goes to talk. And in the meanwhile, Bobby invites the cabbies to come over and watch, quote, the big game over at his place. So at that point, Tony gets off the phone. He's very excited. He comes over and tells the cabbies that he has an out-of-town fight in Scranton. And he says he's fighting the state champ, but in a bit of unnecessary confusion, he's fighting the New Hampshire state champ, not the Scranton state champ. The guy he's fighting just took the title from his father. It's a little bit, I think there was a stretch for a joke in this episode, but whatever. Apparently, it's so urgent that he has to leave right this second. Like, he just got to the garage, and now he's got to leave and go. And on his way out, Tony asks Bobby to feed his fish while he's away. He has a couple of goldfish, George and Wanda. Just to break in here a little bit now, Father Malone, over the past few episodes, and the rare occasion that we've seen Bobby, because he's been kind of a bit player in a lot of these recent episodes, but you keep carrying the torch for what an insufferable prick Bobby is. This is the first indication of really what a jerk he is. Am I wrong?
Oh, no. I think we've been picking up on what a jerk he is, and I've certainly been reveling in what a jerk he is the entire season. And here, it's just paying off in the grandest way possible. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, because it's been drummed into our heads that they're best friends. But at this point, Bobby's very reluctant. He doesn't really want to have the responsibility of taking care of these. Like, they're fish. I mean, how hard is it? You just throw a little food in the dish and you're done for the day.
Right. Does Bobby Wheeler owe Tony Banta? You're right. He does. He does. Yes, of course. He does need to feed these fish. It is no real imposition. But at the same time, he knows himself, and he knows he's already forgotten that he was asked to look for the fish or look after the fish. And that's going to be proven too a bunch in the episode. So him saying, "Don't put me in charge of your fish," is valid. Like, I'm going to kill him. But should friendship overrule that? Should he strive as hard as he would strive to get a role, make his role for the next day and a half the Ahab to the white whales of Tony's goldfish?
It's true, because Tony, it plays the card when Bobby's kind of begging off. Tony tells him, like, "Hey, I do a lot of stuff for you, dude. Can you do something for me for once?" But to your point, Father Malone, in essence, these fish are about to be sacrificed on the altar of friendship, because Bobby knows that these fish are dead meat. There's no way with his lifestyle, with his absent-mindedness, there's no way these fish are going to live a day, let alone a week or whatever. In a sense, that's very self-aware of Bobby to recognize that about himself, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
We knew, and so clearly does he.
With this sort of additional guilt trip that Tony throws at him, Bobby relents and says, "Yeah, I'll take care of the fish." We find out the fish mean a lot to Tony because they've been together for 4 years. Tony bought them with his first big fight purse, which was exactly $3, which supports. I mean, he's not washed up. He's just a terrible fighter. I'll leave it there.
Only been at it for 4 years, apparently. But right?
No. I think he's been fighting professionally for 4 years. But my guess is he's had many years of training in amateur fighting before that. So that's short selling how much he's fought.
Except for his stint working for the government.
This is true. We'll find out that he's a veteran. And we thank Tony for his service. In the meantime, Laka is still moaning about his tooth, and Louis finally relents. And in gratitude, and I thought this was also a great joke. And by the way, this is the wrap up of this so-called B plot.
Thank God. When he said, "Yeah, you can go," I went, "Wow, this is done? Oh, yeah. Fantastic." But then the joke is really good. It's a long way to go for this joke, considering this is not a B plot. It's just a setup to get us here. But
it is.
But the joke is good. So
the joke is good, and I'm not going to do it justice. Not that I ever did these jokes justice, but basically, Locke is so happy and he has so much gratitude for Louis and letting him go, and he says to Louis, and I'm not going to do a Locke impression, but he says to Louis, Louis, people say a lot of things about you. That you're mean, that you're cruel, and you're nasty, and you're cheap. And he just walks away. Instead of you, like you think that Locke is going to say, well, but you're none of those things. You're actually a really good guy.
I stand up for you, Louis, when they say that, because I know you're not. No. I just want you to know people say these things.
DeVito plays it beautifully. Like the look on his face, he's just kind of like confused. Like, wait a minute, wasn't there going to be someone sticking up for me here? But he just walks off. And for the fact that it's just this little inconsequential so-called B plot, it was a fun wind up, and it didn't belabor what could have been the tiresome side plot to the episode. Now we cut to our favorite set, Father Malone. It's Bobby's fabulous downstairs apartment.
Casa de Wheeler.
We've gushed about how much the set decorators put into this in every set, but this set in particular, it's gorgeous.
I'm going to do it again. Ready?
Yeah.
2 bottles of Chianti for decoration. It's not there for eating. Okay. Painting on the wall is The White Barn by George O'Keeffe. That long painting of the barn. Yeah. She painted that in 1932. Okay. Ready?
Yep.
Here are the books on his shelf. Encyclopedia of Space. I Lived with Latin America. The Collected Works of Somerset Maugham. There are 2 volumes. The Erotic Reader. Okay.
Ooh.
And then Summer in Sodom. Okay, that's a book by Edwin Fay from 1962. There are 2 copies of it. There are 2 copies.
Let's bear in mind, these episodes were on and they were repeated maybe once or twice, but they had no conception of somebody like you, Father Malone, pausing it and going frame by frame, looking at every single piece of furniture and books and paintings and everything.
I don't need to frame by frame. I just touch the screen and these things come to me. Psychometry.
That's incredible. I love when you can pick up these details, Father Malone. Alex and Latka, we see them come down the stairs. They arrive, but Bobby doesn't come to the door. And Alex remembers that there's a spare key by the door. Now here's the thing. Here's another side note. And I can't take full credit for this because this was also called out in the Lovey's book. But what rational New Yorker would keep a spare key right outside their door? That's such a logical hole, in my opinion. Don't you agree?
I do agree. And then I also am of the mind that nobody would be crazy enough to leave their key under the mat. So I will do it.
I guess it's a bit of reverse psychology there, perhaps.
I think it's in line with Bobby Wheeler as a character, honestly.
Yeah, it's in line with his overall thoughtlessness, but it would have made more sense for the writers just to have given Alex a key that he could have had. You give a friend a key just in case you're out of town and you need to get in your house or whatever, or a neighbor. It would have made more sense just to give Rieger the key and say, oh, I have a spare key. Let me open the door. But somehow they go through this business of finding the key outside the door. But nevertheless, he finds the key and he opens the door and they start to get settled in to watch the football game. In stumbles Bobby, looking very, very, very self-satisfied. As he tells it, apparently they just stayed up all night talking with this lady friend, and he's very happy with himself. So they sit down to watch the game.
You know what? Let me talk about the big game for a second, if I may, HP. Because while Bobby is futzing around and just doing his thing, we're finding out he maybe was trying to score with the girl and everything. There's little bits of comedy going on. Rieger and Lotka are seated at the television, and Rieger keeps calling out, "Bobby, you're missing a great game." The game started 2 fucking minutes ago. They just sat down. How great is the game? Did they turn over like 6 times within 2 minutes? That's the level of excitement Rieger is showing for what's going on that television is not really measured.
Well, I think the only conclusion we can draw from this is that Alex is a very lonely man who just needs, he is so happy and so pleased to be away from the 4 walls of his apartment. He just wants some human contact. So I think that's why and keeps saying, "Bobby, get over here, Bobby, get over here," because he just wants to hang out, right? He's just so desperate for human contact.
Right. What's funny is he's sitting next to Lotka, so maybe he's really just sick of Lotka. Like, "Bobby, over here. I can't take any of the gibberish anymore, Bobby."
Tony calls Bobby, and Bobby gives the phone to Alex, and they're talking about the fight and whatever. They chat for a bit, and Alex encourages Tony to win the fight, and Bobby does the same.
The Platters are staying at the hotel with Tony.
No, but it's only one of the Platters, right?
And it's a cousin. It's a cousin of one of the Platters.
That's right, in Scranton. Bobby's incredulous that on the eve of one of the biggest fights of Tony's career, Tony is still concerned about these 2 fish, because as they're on the phone, Tony is asking about the fish and how they're doing and blah, blah, blah. Bobby says, "What's so great about these fish anyway? They just kind of sit there floating on their backs."
Bobby is sociopath.
I think he is. I think this is maybe a darker side to him. Maybe he knew he was full well that he was killing these fish.
Not only the fish killing itself, but the inability to understand why Tony would be so attached to these fish that have been his companions for 4 years now. He's got a big fight coming. What does he care about these stupid fish for?
It definitely points to a lack of empathy, which I guess in its most extreme could be looked at as sociopathic. But yeah, I would say that the signs are definitely there. I think Tony is too naive and lunkheaded to really pick up on that. But I think maybe that's why Alex is always there as a buffer between them. Alex is there to protect Lotka, I think, in this case, because who knows what would happen if Bobby's there alone with Lotka. Bobby being this kind of scary sociopath, who knows? Maybe, you know how they say some serial killers kill animals before they get the guts to kill a person?
Yeah.
Maybe this is his entry into the world of serial killing. Who knows? He says to Alex, "Oh, they're just kind of sitting there, just kind of floating." And Alex says, "Well, they do move their fins around." And Bobby says, "These fish aren't moving." But he's still not picking up on the obviousness of the fact that these fish are dead. And at this point, they cut over to Alex, and you can see that the penny drops, and Alex knows that something's up. And he asks Bobby, "Did you feed the fish today?" And Bobby says, "Oh, how could I? I just got home. He was out all night." "Oh, but I'll feed him now." And he dumps this obscene amount of fish food into the little bowl, which I think anybody who's had fish as a child like me, the look of that dried fish food floating and slowly making its way to the bottom of the fish tank is a common sight. Alex kind of face palms and says to himself, "I don't want to go over there." Because he knows what he's going to see once he walks over there, and it's going to become real to him. So he goes over and says, "Oh my God, Bobby, they're dead."
And now my favorite line in the episode. "I guess it was their time."
He says it so naturally and so sympathetically. Jeff Conaway is great. He really sells the character.
You know what I like about Bobby? He's not stupid. He's oblivious. There's a difference there, right? He just doesn't give a shit.
It's a lack of intent, right?
Right.
He's not trying to be mean. He's not trying to be a bad person. He's oblivious. And it makes sense because this is a guy who's blessed with very, very good looks, with charm, with acting ability. So Realistically, he doesn't really need to be the most self-aware person. He's probably got women throwing themselves at him day and night. The only thing he doesn't have is a job, like a real acting job, at least now. But he probably was able to, with his good looks, he's probably able to float through life, not really caring what people think. So it makes sense. After he says, well, it's just their time, is maybe my second favorite line delivery, which Alex says, both of them together? Like it's both of their time? Bobby wonders, well, maybe it was a murder-suicide thing. And we cut back to the garage. Alex, Elaine, and Burns are wondering, what's Tony going to do when he finds out? Because he's going to be coming home soon.
My thought is Tony's going to knock Wheeler out.
As we'll discuss, it almost gets to that point. I like the way they handled it, because that would be the easy thing to do.
I did too. I'm going to end up really liking Tony Vanta as a character a great deal by the end of this episode.
I think they're concerned more for his own feelings in the matter and less concerned about Bobby getting knocked out, which is probably what he should be expecting at this point. Burns, with no small amount of glee, says that Tony is going to be heartbroken.
All is coming to plan, Burns says.
He's at least playing at being sensitive, but now Louis is openly gleeful. He's like rubbing his hands together. He can't wait for Tony to get there so he can break the bad news to him.
Is great here. He's shining.
There's not a lot of Louis in this particular episode, but he's great. Just should be understood at this point that DeVito's always going to hit it out of the park. Alex warns Louis not to blurt out that Bobby killed his fish. And as we know, and we can continue to see, Alex is maybe the one cabbie that has the ability to get through to Louis because they have that interesting relationship. So it seems like Louis is going to back off or what have you.
Oh, yeah. No, but he's definitely not. Every time Louis threatens to say something, if you watch Jeff in the background, Jeff is absolutely delighted with Louis' behavior. It made me really appreciate Jeff as a character. Like he every time Louis almost hits with "your fish are dead," basically, like Jeff is not egging him on, but like enjoying the show.
But do you think it's Jeff or do you think it's J. Allen Thomas, the actor, saying, "Oh, this is hilarious. Like I'm really enjoying this."
Well, I'm watching the show and I only know the character of Jeff, and Jeff seems to be having a grand old time watching Louis De Palma in that cage. I mean, they're stuck together. He's got to like him in some way or another, right? There's got to be a point where you go, as long as he's not pointing it at me, I'm just going to appreciate it.
So Tony ends up finally bops in from his trip and the cabbies.
Okay, wait. Before he gets there, Bobby's not there yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Bobby's going to be late, right? That's what they tell him. Bobby's had 24 hours to concoct a plan. I'm very disappointed in Bobby Wheeler. Maybe he is just that. He's just a narcissistic prick, and that's what I should love about it. Because I was hoping for something a little more nefarious here. I guess if this were a Burns episode, he would have come up with something better than the old switcheroo, the old I'll go to a pet store and get other goldfish, and he'll definitely buy these fish that he's had for 4 years.
That bit where Bobby goes and brings the replacement fish, that's as sitcom-y as this particular episode gets. I think we can agree, where we've seen that in a million different sitcoms. Like they on
Toby Gillis, I bet. Andy Griffith probably had a switch in the goldfish. Andy, that's not my pet fish.
Yeah, I think Welcome Back Kotter did it. You could just go down the line. I'm sure there was a different strokes that probably maybe Abraham the goldfish, Arnold's goldfish died and they tried to replace it.
I think there definitely was an episode where they did that.
Not to get ahead of ourselves, but I think that's probably one of my biggest knocks against this episode is that is a little bit too contrived and sitcom-y, but it is what it is. It doesn't kill the episode for me, but they could have been more creative with Bobby, knowing what we know about Bobby at this point. But so I agree with you. They could have done more with that. Tony comes in, cabbies make a big point of rushing over to him and in an effort to distract him or maybe just delay things so Bobby can get there. They start asking him about the fight, which he lost, of course. The cabbies are trying to make small talk with Tony about his trip, and he's talking about Scranton, how cold Scranton was, and da-da-da. And all the while, you see Louis just looming in the background, waiting for his chance to come up with a one-liner, and it's a great piece of comedy business. But then Tony pulls out a gift that he brought for the fish.
This is heartbreaking. Honestly,
it really is. It's a little ceramic castle that you put into the fish tank, and he even makes a point of saying it says Scranton It's a souvenir from Scranton for the fish.
Scranton Aquarium, man.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, maybe they can swim through the windows, and it really is heartbreaking that to see this tough guy who loves these fish so much.
HP, you ever been to Scranton?
I have not. That's where the office was set, was it not?
Yeah, I've been there a couple times. It reminded me of Lynn, Massachusetts. Yeah, it was a bit hard to travel there. Yeah, I remember one night, in fact, driving and being chased. People on foot chasing my vehicle. And it was the place where I, in a diner, tried the local delicacy of scrapple. I always like to try a local cuisine, and they convinced me that that's the one to get. And I think they were having a joke on me because scrapple is one of the most disgusting things on planet Earth.
Wait, let's back up. Why were they chasing you on foot?
I was looking for a submarine sandwich at a very late night situation, and there was one open in a rather sketchy part of town. And I slowed down in an area that maybe crime could occur on in in a very easy manner. And suddenly there were several hooligans chasing after my minivan. And so I sped away. I went submarine sandwichless that night. Although they'd call it a hoagie.
But you walked away with all your teeth and all your money and all your belongings. I mean, that's a win as far as I'm concerned.
I wanted some Primanti Brothers, man. You ever been there? They put the fucking fries on the sandwich and the coleslaw and everything. It's so good.
What's in Scrapple, incidentally? Can you?
It's like head cheese type stuff. It's all awful. It's, OFFAL kind of,
As Tony's talking about this castle, he's reflecting, and he says to the cab, it's maybe silly that I love these fish so much, but Tony really sees the fish as symbols of survival. If these little fish can survive in this world, then so can Tony. And that's very inspirational. It's sad because we know what Tony doesn't know, but
inspirational to us, sad ultimately for Tony, but hilarious for Louis De Palma in that cage every time he mentions how much he loves those fish, knowing they're dead.
He can hardly contain himself in that cage. This is a whirlwind trip for Tony. He's been gone literally 24 hours at this point. He asks Alex, how are the fish doing? How are they looking? And this is a perfect line reading by Judd Hirsch. He says, he kind of stops for a minute, thinks to himself and says, peaceful, which says a lot without saying a lot. Tony walks away to put his stuff in the lockers or what have you. And the cabbies are still fretting over telling him the truth, except for one person. One person is stepping forward to try and wrangle this. And of course it's Burns, ever so in chaos. He with barely concealed glee, he says, it's going to break the poor guy's heart. I think we're led to believe that it's him crying out in empathy, but we know he's stifling a laugh. You know how sometimes you're laughing so much you start to cry? That's where Burns is at. And
he's preaching to the back wall. He's letting everyone in the garage know that there's some misery about to occur so he can feed off of their empathy. And
Bobby finally hurries in with a couple of new fish. He's got the fish bowl in his hand, 2 healthy fish swimming around.
The cloudiness of that bowl is distressing.
It looked like it had to be cleaned. Is that what you're saying? It
was filthy. If you look at the fish in the previous scene, I mean, granted, those fish are dead, but that water is crystal clear. Here, it looks like, I don't know, like they poured tap water from actual New York City from 1979. It doesn't look healthy. It begs the question, has he been rushing around all day with this fish tank sloshing around in the front seat of his cab or in his car? No, because in typical Bobby Wheeler fashion, this is a last minute thing. He came right from the pet store. He said he had to go to 3 or 4 different ones to find ones that matched the fish. But how is he transporting this fish tank? It's definitely sloshing around. It just wasn't sloshing around for that long because that would have taken some forethought on his part. So he comes in and he presents these fish. He says, here you go, Tony. Here's the fish. They're happy to see you. And Tony says, oh, I love these guys. And you think initially, oh, he's going to pull it off. And he says, no, I hope they get along with my fish. So he's not fooled in the least. He knows that these aren't George and Wanda. Yeah, but apparently the writers think that we are because they give us this bullshit line of "I love these guys." Like he would say that to fish he just met.
It's sitcom-y in the extreme, and it's the biggest negative I can give this episode. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's not believable at all. After he reveals that he knows these aren't his fish, it's kind of funny because the rest of the cabbies kind of skedaddle. They scatter. For all of their concern and their fretting, they don't want any part of this. They're going to leave Bobby to clean up his own mess at this point, because I think they're fed up. I think we can agree, Father Malone. They're just fed up with Bobby at this point.
And they're frightened of Tony because he's a powder keg underneath all of that sweetness.
You're thinking they're afraid he's going to explode in violence against them as well?
Bill Bixby, he's going to freak the fuck out when he finds out his fish are dead, man. He's going to rip down that stairway leading up to that second floor. All the chicken wire is going to come tumbling down on those cabs. Space Girl's going to go running, definitely.
Bobby's left with Tony there, and Tony asks where his fish are. And finally, Bobby owns up to his mistake, and he confesses to Tony that he forgot to feed the fish, and they died. But he does say he thinks they died in their sleep, as this ham-handed attempt at comforting Tony in his dark moment. Tony asks, well, where are they now? You better not have flushed them. And Bobby says, no, of course not. And this is so disgusting. He pulls a Ziploc baggie out of his front shirt pocket and kind of unfurls it. And there are the two dead fish. He's been carrying them around. Was I the only one skeeved out by this image, Father Malone?
No, I literally wrote in my notes, Ziploc bag of fish is great. It's so in character, first of all. And it now conjures images of Bobby Wheeler crouched against fish tanks in various pet stores in downtown New York City, holding up a Ziploc bag, trying to match goldfish up to other goldfish that are living. And he did that 4 different times.
You're right. He would have had it as a means of color matching and size matching the fish.
Oh, yeah, it's vile.
It's gross. It's so disgusting.
I was delighted by it, though.
At that point, Tony sullenly just says to him, you killed my fish. The air is charged with the very real possibility that he might, as you say, he might explode. You don't know how he's going to react because he loves these fish. It's been hammered into our heads. And now that he's finally confronted with the reality that they're dead.
HP, as much as you hate Tony Banta and think he's a washed-up has-been,
I don't hate him. Whoa, I don't hate him. Where are you getting this from?
Anyway, as poor a showing as he gives in the professional boxing world, he could really do damage to Wheeler with one punch. I mean, there's an episode called One Punch Banta.
I'm sure compared to the average layperson, he may as well be the world's strongest man. He's used to fighting hardened fighters who can take a punch and who are used to this. But if you're not, he could punch a hole through your chest for all I know.
You could end Pretty Boy's acting career with one swing. One swing in retribution for the lost goldfish, George and Wanda. Does he tell us why they were called George and Wanda?
No, that's the one bit of info we don't find out.
Probably they worked in the production office in some way. That's usually the answer here on Taxi, I've noticed.
Bobby does at that point. He offers just to let Tony hit him. He just says, I know you're mad. Just hit me. Just don't hit me in the face because I have an audition. He kind of cocks back like as if he's going to hit him, but he just says, I don't want to hit you. I want nothing to do with you. And I love this. This is such a TV sitcom thing. He says, I want nothing to do with you, friend. Like he has this derisive way of saying the word friend. Kind of reminded me of the Brady Bunch when they were calling Peter when he was in the school play and they all kept calling him Benedict Arnold. But they had this way of derisively calling him Benedict Arnold, even though he was just playing Benedict Arnold in a play. But there was a way that they twisted the tone of it to mock him almost. Yeah. And that's kind of what we're seeing here when he says friend. Friend is normally a happy word. It's a term of endearment, but not the way Tony says it. Oh, no.
No, it's so weird that your reference for that is another 70s television show.
That's my cultural reference point, I guess. I don't know.
I speak the same language, so I get it.
We cut to commercial and it's what's going to happen now. So cut to the next day. Tony's coming in doing his thing and Bobby is so over the top trying to get Tony's attention, trying to get him to talk to him, interact with him, make conversation. He's he tries to get Tony to talk about how much he booked. He won't answer, but Louis answers that he booked $90, fish killer. Now Louis has, he doesn't have to stop for anybody. He could just call him fish killer with impunity. Tony continues to ignore Bobby in his attempts to chat. I think at even one point, Bobby says, hey, I got 2 tickets to the Islanders. You want to go see? He just walks by. Here's another side note from this episode. Did you see this? So he offers him the tickets.
Yeah.
Tony does nothing. Bobby takes the tickets and throws them on the table where Burns is sitting.
Yeah.
Did you notice what Burns did?
Did he take them?
He took the tickets. It didn't look to me like Bobby was offering them to Burns, like, here, take my tickets.
It certainly was not.
No, he just kind of flips the tickets on the thing. Burns shrugs to himself, picks up the tickets and looks at them. I can only presume now he's going to the Islanders instead of Bobby and Tony. I was just struck by the fact that these weren't his tickets. They were not being offered to him specifically, and yet he takes them. And Bobby is so wrapped up in Tony being upset at him that he doesn't even care. So that was interesting. I thought that was fascinating. Bobby goes to talk to Alex about what's going on. He's desperate. He's trying to find a way to get through to Tony and hash this out.
Before that, HP, Tony completes the second of the here's how a tough guy sits down. We've seen him turn the chair around 180 degrees and get the back resting against his chest. Now he does the leap up hands-free onto the hood of a cab.
Does he even put his hands down? He just kind of leaps up like a high jump.
That's right. Tough guy getting on a car hood.
Alex initially tries to act a little tough with Bobby and resist because I think he wants Bobby to realize what he did was wrong. So he doesn't jump in immediately to help Bobby. But eventually he says to him, you want me to talk to him? And Bobby says, yeah, I'd like you to talk to him. He asks Alex to invite Tony to his place for some beers and they can talk it out with Alex there to mediate.
He sets a meeting. He asks Alex to set a meeting so they can sit down and hash out their problems, right? Yeah. He instigates this meeting because we guess he feels so bad. In fact, he says he feels really bad about this situation. He wants to make amends, right? Or is it that as a sociopath, he realizes the social cues, that he has gone beyond the pale and now actually needs to make amends to this other person so that they can not know that he actually feels no emotions at all? That's why he became an actor, to try and figure out what emotions were.
Maybe that's his best shot at playing at the emotion of trying to be sympathetic. So he picks the most emotionally grounded person in the garage to help him. Look, if you're going to try to act in the part of a policeman, what do? You go see a policeman, you interview them, you talk to them, you observe them. So I guess maybe Bobby is trying to assume the part of a feeling, sympathetic, empathetic person. So who does he go to? He goes to Alex. That's actually kind of brilliant.
Why he wants Alex there so he can take his cues from Alex. How is Alex reacting to the way Tony is talking? Oh, okay, then I should be sad now. Okay.
Things have taken a very dark turn. I don't know. I thought it couldn't get much more dark than Burns, but now we've got Bobby, who is a sociopath.
I can't help it.
Alex tries to convince Tony to agree to this, to go to Bobby's apartment, but he's not letting Bobby off the hook. Tony says, give me one good reason why I should do this. And after Alex pauses for a moment, he volunteers because the fish would want it that way. This was just a Hail Mary on Alex's part. To Alex's surprise, Tony this finally convinces him and he agrees to go to Bobby's apartment to talk this out. We cut to Bobby's apartment again. And once again, Alex is there early. Tony's with him. They get there early. They let themselves in. No Bobby. Everything is, I think the lights are all turned off and Bobby's not there. And Alex figures, well, it's probably a little bit early and he's probably getting food because let's not forget, Bobby is desperate to end this conflict between he and Tony. So you would think he's going to pull out all the stops to make this happen.
Asked them to be here.
Yeah, it was his invitation. Exactly. So while they're waiting, Tony starts complaining about all the stuff. He's walking around the apartment and he's pointing out all the things that Bobby has borrowed that he never gave back. He's like, well, that's my lamp. Those are my barbells. That's my clock. And that's my football. And the whole apartment is filled with things that thoughtless Bobby has taken and never given back. And at this point, Alex, he tries to stick up for Bobby and he says, well, maybe he's just forgetful. in Tony's reckoning, he says there's guys that he doesn't even like that treat him better than Bobby treats him. He says one guy he hates treats him almost as good. I think he's been lying to himself for a long time and convincing himself that he is his best friend. But the more he digs into all these reasons why he's not a good friend, it's turned his whole mentality against Bobby.
He says, I don't know why I'm friends with him. He treats me creepy, tells me I'm stupid, and then on and on. And then he starts telling, like, there are other guys that I like less than him who treat me better. But I want to go back to the first thing he said. He treats me creepy? The fuck does that mean, HB?
It's a little chilling, given what we now think we know about Bobby. There's a lot of darkness to this character, right?
He treats me like I'm a creep, or does he treat me in a creepy manner? It's so vague that it's maddening. I've been thinking about it ever since.
I agree. The wording of that line, it really is open to interpretation. I think in the extreme, it's a very disturbing line, the way he delivers it. He treats me creepy.
I don't know. It's a phrase I'm going to puzzle over, so I can't give you a definite answer.
What I love about this scene is I actually think it's probably one of the more realistic pieces in the whole show. I love that Tony's getting this all off of his chest, perhaps for the first time, really describing to himself, at least, what kind of person Bobby is and what he thought Bobby meant to him. And maybe he's not the friend that he assumed he was. I like that about this scene. It's played, sort of realistically in that respect. What did you think?
I absolutely agree with you. What I came away with the scene is not only, well, it's part and parcel, because his figuring out what his relationship is with Bobby mirrors his reaction to it, in my mind, which is very evolved. Tony is played as a dope a lot of the time on this show. But here, given the fact that his best friend is basically a narcissistic creep who killed his two best friends, his companions, and now he's effectively going to forgive him, because what he wants to do is destroy a bunch of Bobby's shit, but can't bring himself to do even that, because he's not only accepted who Bobby is, he's accepted that that's who Bobby is in his life. Which, man, oh man, I'm 50 years old and I can't see my way through some relationships like that.
It's a remarkable piece of self-awareness for the person that up to this point in the season is one of the most lunk-headed characters, we think, because he's just a palooka, right? Amazingly, in this bit of self-reflection, he maybe understands better than anyone what's going on with Bobby and his relationship to Bobby and how complex that is. I think that's really amazing. Just at that point, a giggling Bobby stumbles in to the apartment with a fur coat clad woman. And initially, he's kind of standoffish. Like, again, this is the obliviousness coming to bear. Like, he is like, what are you guys doing here? Like, he gets mad.
Once again, Wheeler, who set up this meeting at his apartment, has shown up with a girl and is like, what the fuck are you guys doing here? Get out. That meeting could not have been set up more than 8 hours prior.
Right.
By the way, you know what? Did it actually, I'm going to take back some of what I said about Tony. It took him this long to figure out who this guy is and that you shouldn't leave your fish with him? Get the fuck out of here.
Let's assume they're at the garage and let's say it's 5:30, 6 o'clock, let's say. Ostensibly, they're going to be doing dinner at his house. So it was probably not 8 hours. It could have been like 2 hours. It could have been 3 hours since he's the one who set up this meeting.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. That almost points to, like, you have to wonder, did Bobby have a head injury that affects, is he like Memento? Does he have a lack of short-term memory?
Right. It's either that. It's good that it's about goldfish this episode, if his memory is actually that long. Or is it that he is, in fact, a goddamn sociopath who just likes to play dumb? Like I likened Burns to a Jim Thompson villain or hero, the
Yeah.
playing like they're dopey, but really just scheming on the inside. Like that's the only other option. I don't think it is with Bobby. I don't think he is a sociopath, but it is very alarming that he has forgotten this quick, this meeting that he set up to ameliorate the situation that he created through his own forgetfulness. You know what? Let me walking back what I said about Banta's character. It is very evolved. This is about him accepting his friend's place in his life less than accepting his friend is a dickhead. He always knew his friend was a dickhead.
But it also begs the question. So if he can barely remember a meeting that he set up not 3 hours prior, how the hell does he expect to become an actor who has to memorize lines and lines of dialogue and perform them? How can someone who has no short-term memory even hope to do that? I wonder.
Okay, maybe he doesn't have to necessarily be a sociopath, but I'm going to go back to what I like about Wheeler to begin with. He's just a prick. If he got a part in a play or a commercial or a movie, he would know every line. He would be on set every day. He would wake up 8 hours ago. He wouldn't sleep the night before because he'd be so excited to not miss that opportunity.
That's true. When it would benefit him and him specifically, I'm sure he could put in the extra effort to remember these things. But he killed his best friend's fish. He's desperate to make this right, and he can't even be trusted to show up on time for his own self-intervention, if you will. It's absurd. It really is absurd. He really is a special kind of jerk to do this.
It is, but really, this is about Banta's acceptance that test that he put Bobby to was a bullshit friendship test. It's like thinking you can change a person in a relationship, right? Like that's your expectation. It has nothing to do with them. He fully well should have known Bobby is going to kill his best friends and tried hoping against hope for that not to happen. It's like the old, with the turtle and the scorpion. Like, well, yes, of course I was going to sting you. I'm a scorpion.
That's my nature. It's almost okay because at least Tony understands the kind of person Bobby is, and he still loves him.
There's no easy solution at the end of this episode, HP, but there is a macabre solution.
We'll get to that. Alex goes over to Bobby, who, as I said, is kind of upset that these guys are in his apartment when he brings a woman home. Alex reminds him that they're here for Tony. Bobby, if nothing else, he makes a show of realizing, oh, I can't believe I forgot. Oh, man, da-da-da. Alex starts to spew some invective at Bobby and really tears into him for not having the common courtesy to remember that this thing's happening. The girl, Dominique, starts to leave, but Bobby asks her to wait in the bedroom. He's going to try and figure this out. All the while, Alex is tearing into Bobby so much that it's Tony that tries to defend Bobby. Now, Tony is the one who has the biggest gripe against Bobby of all of them because he's been a jerk to him for who knows how long, and he just killed his fish. So it's interesting to see now Alex, the peacemaker, is now the one who is giving it back to Bobby even more than Tony, right?
Crisscross. They're now arguing opposite sides of their actual beliefs and stuck in the middle just watching. It's a great scene. It's stuck in the middle watching it as Bobby Wheeler, and in a confounded way. Why are you yelling at each other? I'm the asshole here.
Alex is just too mad. He actually even throws some blame at Tony for putting the fish in the hands of a man who can't even feed himself half the time. Like you were saying earlier, Tony had to know that his fish were in jeopardy the minute that he gave them to Bobby to look after, because he knows what kind of person Bobby is. And yet he thought Bobby would rise to the occasion. And Alex's point is, like, how could you think that? Look at this guy. He couldn't even be bothered to remember this meeting that we've all set up, this dinner where we're going to hash things out. He's the one who wanted to do it. Alex and Tony are really squaring off. And now Bobby's the one who's got to get in the middle and break it up because things are getting very heated. He reminds them, like you said, that, look, I'm the one that you all should be mad at. I'm the one who is thoughtless and I killed the fish and everything else. He breaks through their stalemate and they all start to laugh, remembering that, yeah, that's why they're there. They're not here to legislate Bobby's behavior overall. They're here to talk this through. Bobby claps them both on the back and says, look, guys, grab your coats. We're going to go out for a steak dinner. They're going to have, this is talk about 70s. They're going for steak and Lowenbrow.
Oh, That's fucking fancy.
Do they even make Lowenbrow anymore? Father, do you know, Father Malone?
If they do, we are going to record an episode of Night Mr. Walters where we each drink a Lowenbrow.
At the time, they were a popular beer. They were advertised very heavily on TV. I can still remember do you remember their tagline?
I don't. Tell me.
Here's where I cut into the episode and I play the commercial. But if it's the one I'm thinking of, the tagline, I'm not going to sing it. It was sung, was "Tonight, let it be Lowenbrow."
Here's to good friends. Tonight is kind of special. The beer will pour. Must say something more somehow. So tonight, let it be Lowenbrow. Let it be Lowenbrow.
Oh, yes, let it be Lowenbrow. My God.
Tonight, let it be Lowenbrow. So we know this is going to be fancy, right? Steak and Lowenbrow, just like the commercial, Bobby says. And after dinner, Bobby says he knows a scalper that can get them Knicks tickets.
This is going to be a great night. Bobby Wheeler going to deliver. He doesn't make promises he's not going to keep. He's not going to tell you I'm going to meet you in 2 hours from now at my apartment, and then not show up with a girl.
Now the guys are arm in arm. They're laughing. They're looking forward. They're going to have a great night out. Just the guys. Just as they're walking out, Bobby remembers, oh my God, I left that girl Dominique in my bedroom. Bobby resolves to stop letting people down. He's going to stop letting people down. So he says, I'm going to go in the bedroom. I'm going to let her know that I'm going out with the guys, and that's that. So Bobby goes to the bedroom. Alex and Tony are left waiting in I guess it's the living room. They're kind of awkwardly tossing a football around. Alex is whistling to himself a little bit. And this scene does go on it feels like it goes on for a long time because it's
an uncomfortable amount of time, leading to the fact that this is an incredibly uncomfortable thing that's going on here. Bobby Wheeler was supposed to go tell a girl, either you got to go or I'll be back later, and then come back out and join his friends. They're clearly now fooling around in the bedroom.
And it's wordless. Alex and Tony aren't actually talking or saying anything because they think he's going to be out any minute. But as it goes longer and longer, they wordlessly realize that he's not coming out. He and this girl are probably in for the night. We can see a leopard rarely changes its spots. And Bobby, once again, this is another example of his thoughtlessness, of his obliviousness, right? Of his self-absorption.
And I love him for it. Here he goes. He just continues to be him. By the way, in the weirdest kind of uncomfortable, to the point where I kind of love him on another level, because this is out of hand what he just did. I mean, look, I guess we all have that friend, but good Lord, man. Here's my apology, guys. I'll take care of it tonight. Oh, fuck. What are you guys doing here? Oh, I was supposed to apologize. Okay, I'll take care of that right now. I'm gonna, and then it's like, look over there. And then he runs in the other direction. Like, that would be a less subtle
Right.
version of what he's doing to them.
There's no excusing what Bobby has done here. It's just remarkable that even after all of this back and forth and this wrangling with Tony, he can't change who he is. To your point, he's the scorpion riding on the back of the alligator or whatever. It's his nature to be a prick. That's just who he is. Without saying a word, Alex and Tony both decide to leave, but not before, in a nice little tag, Tony remembers to feed his new fish and they leave. We have one little bumper, and this is where the macabre bit really comes in here. They're at the garage, and Bobby strolls in with a massive item in a bag. He declares that he has a presentation to make to his best friend, Tony. What is this big object, Father Malone, and what is so macabre about it?
It is a gigantic plaque, like the size of two men. It's a plaque that you could imagine 12 scientists sitting in the jaws of. And mounted in the middle are the tiny, tiny goldfish. Now, this led to my mind going to Bobby Wheeler paying for this with a giant oversized novelty check, perhaps lighting the room with one of those giant novelty Zippos.
Can you imagine if you're working in one of these stores where they sell plaques and trophies for sporting events like kids' soccer trophies and what have you, And some lunatic comes in with this plastic baggie, because he still has the plastic baggie with George and Wanda. And he says, hey, can you mount these fish? Like, if I were that guy, I'd say, get the hell out of here, you lunatic. Get out of here.
You know what? I bet they mount fish all the time, like game fish. So here's what I think happened. I think he came in and said, I want to mount some fish. And they said, yeah, we do that. And he says, I want to mount these goldfish. And they said, it'd be funny? Put it on this gigantic placard. And it's the placard that they were never able to move in the store, And then so Bobby walks out of that store and they're like, we sold it.
They're high-fiving each other because they got rid of this giant albatross around their necks, right?
God, it's been in inventory since 72. Like, Jesus, why did we order this thing?
Perhaps the macabre cherry on the bizarreness of the moment. It's almost EC Comics like, where Tony looks at it and he declares it the most beautiful thing he ever saw. You imagine, like, these are the fish. He loved these fish. These fish were a symbol of survival and perseverance. To see them so cruelly preserved and slapped on to a giant joke plaque like it is.
Yeah, and like everybody sort of crowded around for the freeze frame around this plaque. It's very easy comics. I expected the Crypt Keeper to come popping out. Well, Tony wasn't expecting his friends to be so well preserved.
It's a chilling tableau, in my opinion.
I wondered earlier if we were going too dark. I don't think we are, considering the content of this show.
There's no misinterpreting the moment. It's really chilling, very chilling. So that's the episode, Friends. Talk about yellow lights.
What does a yellow light mean?
Now, just a reminder, we score these shows on a scale from 1 yellow light to 5 yellow lights. 5 yellow lights this is the perfect Taxi episode. They don't get any better than this. 1 yellow light is this could not get any worse. This is the worst episode of Taxi that they've possibly produced. And as we do every week, I'm going to throw it to you, Father Malone. How many yellow lights do you give Friends?
I give it 3 yellow lights. I would give it 2 for criminally underusing Nardo in the episode, because she looks spectacular in that jean and red blouse combo. Look, am I objectifying or making things worse? Maybe. But she was not well used in the episode, so that ought to knock it down. But the rest of it is so good. And as it turns out, complex and affecting and illuminating in both Banta and Wheeler's case, and in their realizations about each other, that I think it's a pretty good episode, and it's got a lot of funny business in it. Hirsch is always great. I think he's great here. And I guess it was their time.
I came in to rewatch this episode, and I've seen it many times over the years. And when I think of this episode, the first thing I always think of is that bizarre tableau at the end where the fish are mounted on the plaque. And I came into this in my mind thinking, this is going to be like a 2 yellow light episode. This is not one that I remember very fondly, and so on and so forth. But I'll tell you what, as I watched it, I had very much the same reactions that you had. And in fact, I'm just going to cut the suspense. I gave this one 3 yellow lights as well. Like I said, I was fully prepared to slam this thing and say, this is not essential. It doesn't really, there's not much plot to it. It doesn't really, but I'll tell you what, I love that Bobby is featured prominently. It feels like it's been a while since we've seen him have a lot to do in an episode. He's been kind of in the periphery for a couple of episodes now, and it's good to see him having so much to do. And I love the fact that they make no bones about the idea that Bobby is just a crummy friend. He's just a jerk. Like the lengths they go to convey the notion that he's so thoughtless is really kind of commendable here. He's just so self-absorbed. And as we've already discussed, Tony's reaction feels really true to me, even down to the fact that he ends up defending Bobby in the wake of Alex's criticism at the very end of the episode. And Judd Hirsch is solid. He's got some great line readings and he's got some funny bits. And Louis even gets in a few choice zingers here and there. So there's, aside from the fact, again, there's not a lot of ensemble interaction, and some of it is a little too sitcom-y, if you will. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was unexpectedly revealing about both Bobby and Tony in ways that I didn't recall from my watching the show originally. So good on them. I thought this was a decent show. So very good. So we both give it 3 yellow lights. That's going to do it for this episode of Night, Mr. Walters. Father Malone, when you're not clocked into the garage, where can our listeners find you?
You can find me at Midnight Viewing, the Night Gallery podcast, among other podcasts I'm involved in, including Noise Junkies, it's a music podcast HP and I do with Mondo Heather's Heather Drain. Those can all be found at weirdingwaymedia.com.
Fabulous. And I would also encourage our dear listeners to seek out his Dark Destinations podcast. It's one of my favorites. It's a series of audio dramas featuring Father Malone and others in his merry acting troupe, including yours truly. I don't mention it for that reason. I mention it because it's brilliant and you should do yourself a favor and listen to it. As for myself, you can find me also in the Weirding Way Media platform, in addition to Noise Junkies, as Father Malone mentioned. That's our music podcast. I've also done some guest spots on the Culture Cast with Chris Dasher. And also, if you so desire, I have a Bandcamp site called hpmusicplace.bandcamp.com. You can hear some of my musical nonsense there, if you will, hopefully expanding soon. But yeah, those are the places you can find us. So everybody, please feel free to subscribe to the podcast, write a review or rate us. We'd love to hear from you. Whatever is your manner of listening to this podcast, please leave a review, reach out, and let us know how we're doing. So again, for myself and for Father Malone, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Night, Mr. Walters.